Hi everyone, Michael Rubenfeld here. How are you? Um, real good, I hope. I've had an interesting week. I've been talking about foreignness, thinking about my foreignness, and yeah, also thinking about my move to Poland in general, and also Canada. All people are always asking me, why do I live in Poland when I can live in Canada? And I've realized that, gosh, I don't miss Canada at all. I don't want to live in Canada, and I didn't want to live in Canada for a long time. I used to really shit on Canada all the time, and when I say shit on Canada, like I would really complain about it. Um, I wouldn't just like make fun of it. Well, I make fun of the things that I love, but I shit on the things that I don't. This isn't like a rule of mine, and that's not actually how I behave very often. But I was shitting on Canada for a long time, and I still kind of shit on Canada, to be honest. The reality is that in my business, in my business, which is the theater, I I had a good run. I had a really good run. 20 years, I think 20 years working in the Canadian theater. I basically did everything I wanted to accomplish. And then I kind of kept one-upping myself, one-upping. At one point, I almost became the artistic director of the Factory Theater. And it was like clear that the next time that theater came up, at that time, the next time that theater came up, one of the next things that I would do would run a theater. I was running a theater festival for 8 years, and many people graduate from running that theater festival to then running a theater somewhere in the city, or getting a kind of larger job. And basically, like the major thing that happened was first with Black Lives Matter, and then the kind of great cultural shift in the Canadian theater, anyways, which was really interesting. Which was that the theater had a kind of come to Jesus moment about how white, how exclusively white, it had been, and how people of color were the minorities of the Canadian theater. And certainly in like a city like Toronto, where people of color are not minorities in Toronto, which is kind of what makes Toronto great, the theater was not representing that reality in the city, and it had to change. It was unsustainable. The theater was dying as a result. And so that happened. And in Canada, I present as a like a heteronormative white cis man whose pronouns are he, him, and and although I'm Jewish and I feel Jewish, and I don't feel I don't know, as part of the like Christian majority of Canada, Jews are not considered a minority at all in Canada. And that became really clear. Like I wasn't even getting seen for certain theaters. And the person who ended up running those theaters were people of color, and that was the decision. Clearly, that was going to happen at those theaters, and and I understand that decision, and I've always supported that decision, always. But it meant that for me, like I could say I didn't really like have a future in the theater in Canada, unless it was going to be like acting in plays about Jews, or some kind of reinvention could have occurred, and I just didn't want to do it. I had started a venue called Canada Hub in Edinburgh, and I was in a partnership with the Canada Council for the Arts to do that, and so it felt like a really perfect time. I was like, okay, I've got another project. I'm also touring with a show. I was touring with a big show that I was the producer of. I was building a kind of producing impresario kind of a scenario for myself. And I left the country and I moved to Poland because, of course, my wife lived here. I could have asked her to move to Toronto, and she would have, I think. She would have. But I wanted to move to Poland more than she wanted to move to Toronto. So I just left Toronto. I quit my job, and I got out of there. But I just can't imagine what would bring me back. I'm not gonna lie, it's not nice to not deal with uh, like cultural issues. It's a nice thing to not have to deal with. Um, and again, it should be dealt with in Canada. It has to be dealt with in Canada. But it's, it's still exhausting. It's hard. It's still hard. It's hard for people. I don't know how people of color feel about it. I just know that it had been very hard for people of color for a long time, and it might still very well be, but I think it's getting easier, and it's getting harder for white people. I don't think it's for white people to deny that it's hard for them. I don't think it's for anyone to deny that it's hard for them right now. But it's not that it's unfair. And that's, yeah. That's how I felt. I felt like it was getting hard, but it was fair. So I left. And I came to Poland, and everyone's white here. So I just like blend in. Now I am a minority here, but what's interesting is that there's been no kind of like real significant come to Jesus moment in Poland for minorities. Minorities are still treated badly. I think that'll change in like, I'm gonna say 20 years once it's too late for me. But yeah, so I've come here though, and I'm managing to work in the theater in interesting ways, and I'm building an interesting life. I struggle with the Polish language, and that's significant living in Poland because that's the language that people here speak. And so I still feel like an outsider here in Poland because, I still am an outsider. I'll always be an outsider here in Poland. I will always be an outsider here in Poland. But I'm Jewish, and that does make me kind of unique here. And that's also part of the reason that I've come. Because, in a way, I think I've just been living in the wrong country. Which makes a lot of sense, right? Because the Jews were living in Poland for a reason. And, when the Germans came and killed the Jews, got rid of them, they left, and they kind of went all over the world. They left the countries that they were supposed to be in. They left Poland. And once I moved back to Poland, or first once I started coming to Poland, and then ultimately moved back, I think it's just because this is the country that the Jews are supposed to live in. And I felt that when I moved back here. It's a weird thing to say out loud, but I think I believe that. Anyways, that's all. Remember, I've started a Patreon, patreon.com/Michael Rubenfeld. For only 25 zloty a month, you can become a member, and really be a big deal for me, make a huge difference in my life. So I would appreciate it. And other than that, thanks again for watching. Love you.